Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So today we'll be reading from verse 6 of the 11th chapter, Calculation of Time from the Atom, of the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the status quo. Trasareno trikam bhungte Ya kahala satruti smritaha Shata bhagastu vedasyat Teistribhistu lavasmritaha Trasarenu trikam bhungte Ya kahala satruti smritaha Shata bhagastu vedasyat Teistribhistu lavasmritaha Trasareno trikam bhungte Ya kahala satruti smritaha Shata bhagastu vedasyat Teistribhistu lavasmritaha Trasareno trikam bhungte Ya kala saturti smritaha Sata bhagastu vedasyat Taistribhistu svarat smritaha Trasareno trikam bhungte Ya kala satruti smritaha Shatabhagastu vedasyat Teistribhistu smritaha Trasareno trikam bhungte Ya kala satruti smritaha Shata bhagastu vedasyat Teistribhistu lavasmritaha. So we'll do word for word translation. Trasarenu trikam combination of 3 hexatoms. Bhunkte, as they take time to integrate. Ya, that which. Kalaha, duration of time. Saha, that. Trutihi, by the name Truti. Smritaha, is called. Shatabhagaha, 100 Trutis. Tu, but. Vedaha, called a Veda. Syat, it so happens. Tahi, by them. Tribihi, 3 times. Tu, but. Lavaha, lava. Smritaha, so called. And then the translation. The time duration needed for the integration of 3 Thrasharenus is called a Truti, and 100 Trutis make 1 Veda. 3 Vedas then make 1 Lava. And then the purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. It is calculated that if a second is divided into 1,687.5 parts, each is the duration of a Truti, which is the time occupied in the integration of 18 atomic particles. Such a combination of atoms into different bodies creates the calculation of material time. The sun is the central point for calculating all the different durations. So, we're currently in the 3rd canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is basically, we're seeing a discussion between Vidura and Maitreya Muni. And so Vidura, he was a great devotee of the Lord. He was a Shudra by birth, but because he had renounced the world for spiritual enlightenment, he was actually competent enough to be an Acharya. And he was also thoroughly educated by Maitreya Muni in transcendental knowledge. And Maitreya Muni, he was a great sage with great religious authority. And he was directly instructed by the Supreme Lord himself, along with Uddhava. And he later on became the spiritual master of Vidura. So just a brief summary of how we got to this verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Vidura, he's on a pilgrimage and he approaches Maitreya Muni, he inquires from him, and in return he receives transcendental knowledge of the self from the great sage. And so at the end of the discussion, Vidura, he was really convinced by Maitreya Muni that the ultimate purpose of life is to be finally situated in the transcendental loving service of Lord Sri Krishna, who is Govinda, one who satisfies his devotees in all respects. And the discussion shows us that like Vidura did, an inquisitive conditioned soul, so we must approach a bona fide spiritual master like Maitreya Muni, and then we can get the ultimate goal of life, which is bhakti for the Lord. And so we've finished chapter 10, where Vidura, he asks Maitreya Muni to describe how Brahma created the bodies of the living entities from his own body and mind after the Supreme Personality of Godhead he disappeared. So Maitreya Muni, he describes how Brahma divided the universe into 3 and then 14 planetary systems, and then he goes on to answer Vidura's question about what time is, and then he describes the 9 creations. And so we understand what it's like to be, a tree, a dog, snake, or even a human. And then, it summarized which creations are natural, so prakrita, and which are vaikrita, so created by Brahma's intelligence. And then we finished chapter 10 with Maitreya Muni saying he will now go on to describe the descendants of the Manus. And so we begin chapter 11. And we actually seem to encounter like an unlogical, or like a seemingly unexpected break in the flow of the Bhagavatam. Because at the end of chapter 10, we see Maitreya Muni saying, he'll go on to talk about the descendants of the Manus, but here he's describing atoms and time in a lot of detail. And so why? Well, the purpose of elaborately describing time is so that we, conditioned souls, can become detached from our material activities, which are just a waste of time. And then, so from verse 23, we will see how time relates to the Manus. So in this verse, we see descriptions of atom and how they make up time. And in previous verses in the 11th chapter, we were told, 2 atoms, they make 1 double atom, and then 3 double atoms, they make 1 hex atom. And we can actually see this hex atom in the sunlight. When the sun rays are coming through the window, we can see the hex atom, those little particles going up and, towards the sky. And now in this verse, 3.11.6, we can see that 1 Thresarenu is actually a combination of 3 hex atoms. And we will see again in this verse that the time needed to integrate 3 Thresharenus is actually called a Thruti. And then 100 Thrutis, they make 1 Veda. And then further on, 3 Vedas, they make 1 lava. And so all these measurements, they are made up of atoms. But nobody has actually ever seen an atom. Just like how nobody has seen the soul. And we know that Krishna, he's present within every living entity as a Paramatma, as a super soul. And similarly, Krishna, he's also within every single atom. And Srila Prabhupada, he writes, "The Lord is all-powerful, and in his presence, anything impossible can be made possible by his inconceivable energy." So the Lord, he can become bigger than thousands of universes, and at the same time, he can become smaller than the atom. So atoms, they measure time, and time is an amazing thing. So the main focus of our discussion will be on time. So we'll go on to look at how time interacts with Lord Krishna and conditioned souls like us, and also devotees of the Lord. So the Bhagavad Gita, it explains that time is eternal, along with the Supreme Lord, Ishvara, the living entity, Jiva, and Prakriti, nature. So time, it has no beginning, and it has no end. So you might imagine, billions and trillions of years, but still that won't be an adequate estimation of time. Because our imperfect senses, they can't think of the greatness of, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nor can we bring him within the limitation of time or our thinking power. And so his position is described as Ulangita. He is transcendental to space, time, and thought. So the Bhagavatam reveals that eternal time actually comes from the Lord's eyelashes, just as greed, it comes from his lower lip, and affection comes from his upper lip. And eternal time, it's called Kal, because it actually changes the shape of everything in the material world. So even if we start a good project, and we get temporary benefit, over time, time will see that even that good project becomes frustrating for us over time. And so, Kal, it's compared to a cobra snake, whose bite is always lethal. Nobody can be saved from a bite of cobra. And so, what's the remedy? Well, to get out of the clutches of the cobra-like Kal, we need to practice bhakti yoga. Now, Kal, it's the unmanifested, impersonal nature of the Lord, and it's present within the material world. And it's mentioned that Kal, it's neutral towards anyone, towards everyone. Nobody is his ally, and nobody is his enemy. Kal also has many assistants. So it has Swabhava, so one's own nature when we associate with material qualities, Kama, so desire, fruitive activity, karma, and gunas, the 3 modes of material nature. And all of these assistants are actually a cause for material entanglement. And the influence of time, it is very strong. Time is really powerful because it's a representation of the Lord himself. And so, time is stronger than the strongest. If we think about our own lives, time, it's a huge factor, though we might not realize it. Like when we go to sleep, we sleep thinking, I have to get up on time. And then when we're awake, we think, I have to get to work on time. And then when we're at work, we're absorbed in thinking, I have to go to this meeting at this time, and then another meeting after that. And then, look, it's 5 o'clock, I have to pick up my kids, and then we're worried about getting on time to pick our kids. So everything in our life, it seems to be evolving around time, But this is only the case in the material world. So even though time is eternal, even though time is so powerful, there is no influence of time in the spiritual world. Now, this doesn't mean that time doesn't exist in the spiritual world. Time definitely does exist. But it has no control over the activities that happen in the spiritual world. And so, the residents of the spiritual planets, they're free from all anxieties because there's no birth, no death, no old age, and no disease, which are actually the symptoms of time in this material world. And in the spiritual planets, this is because the body and the soul, there's no difference between them. But for us in the material world, we are influenced by time, and in amazing ways as well. So if we think about it, we might be busy sometimes, working or studying, and we might lose all sense of time. But after a couple of hours, if we don't eat anything or, if we don't drink anything, then our stomach will grumble, and our body will tell us it's time to eat. And so the influence of time is in the material creation, and it's actually shown by the 4 principles of material condition. Those birth, death, old age, and disease. So now we know a little bit about time, Kal. So let's now look at how it interacts or its relationship with the Lord. So we know the Lord, he has innumerable devotees all over the universe, and they have been glorifying the Lord since time immemorial. They've been glorifying the Lord for an unlimited amount of time. But still, they can't completely finish glorifying the Lord because, he's unlimited in that way. And the Lord, he is asamurva, unparalleled. Nobody is equal to him, and nobody is greater than him. And so, Krishna's eternal pastimes, Nitya Lila, they happen in the spiritual world, and they have no end. Nitya, it means eternal. And so there is no influence of time there. And it's mentioned, just as the sun actually appears in the morning and then sets in one hemisphere, well, at the same time it's rising in another hemisphere, Lord Krishna's disappearance in one universe and then him beginning his other pastimes in another universe, it actually takes place simultaneously. And so there are innumerable universes, and the Lord, he appears in all of these universes at every moment. And so his Nitya Lila, eternal pastimes, have no end. But because we can't see those pastimes happening, it can be a little bit difficult for us to understand how the Lord is actually eternally manifesting his pastimes. And so in this way, the Lord, he is achintya. He's inconceivable. Krishna's love and Krishna's enmity, they are the same. Like in the material world, we distinguish between love and animosity. Oh, I like this person, but not another one. But for Krishna, they're both the same. So just take an example from Saputna. She actually came to poison the Lord, And in contrast, Mother Yashoda, she was also always very anxious to, protect her naughty little Krishna. And in this sense, Putna and Mother Yashoda, they're like the opposites, But they both actually achieved the same results. How? Well, Krishna, he thought, I have been fed by Putna, so now she is my mother, and so she must reach the same destination as Mother Yashoda. This is the absolute nature of Krishna's enmity and his love, which is inconceivable to us. Now, time, it's divided into the past, present, and future. But the Lord, he has no past, he has no present, and he has no future. Why? Because he's not influenced by eternal time. He's not influenced by Kal, even when he actually incarnates on the earth. So, within a very short amount of time, Krishna, he began to walk very easily in Goloka on his 2 lotus feet, by his own strength, without even needing to crawl. Like, unlike babies in the material world, who they take a time to even, just stand on their own 2 feet. And Krishna, he's also forever 16 years old. Srila Prabhupada, he says in one lecture, you see the sun, you say 12 o'clock, or the sun is older, but the sun, it's actually the same. It is our calculation. So the sun at 12 o'clock, midday, it's not actually older than if we see it like 6 o'clock in the morning, but it's our calculation that we say, oh, the sun, it's like 6 hours older from his appearance in the morning. That's us, that's our calculation. But Krishna, so in this way, he's always 16, but it's actually our calculation, we can't understand it. And so because the Lord isn't influenced by Kal, nothing is really hidden from him. And Krishna, he's all-pervading, and so he can see everybody's activities. So like Arjuna, in the Gita, he says he doesn't want to fight, oh, I don't want to kill the Kauravas. But Krishna, he says, Kalosmi, I am time. So he's already actually killed the Kauravas and all the warriors present. And so he is time. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that time is destruction. How? Well, if there is creation, if something manifests, then it's only a matter of time before it becomes unmanifest or it's destroyed. So if something is created, then it must also have a destruction. And eternal time is responsible for this creation and destruction. And so there are 3 processes within creation. So there's creation, maintenance, and then finally annihilation. And the Lord, he expands himself into three to do these processes. So Brahma, he creates the world. Lord Vishnu, he maintains the world. And Lord Shiva, he annihilates the world. And eternal time, so it is without beginning, but it's a creator of all creatures. The example of a touchstone is given, the touchstone. It creates many valuable stones and jewels, but it doesn't decrease in power. So similarly, creation, it occurs many times. Everything is maintained, and after a time, everything is annihilated. But the original creator, the Supreme Lord, he remains untouched and undiminished in power. And so secondary creation is created by Brahma, but Brahma again, he is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when Lord Shiva annihilates this creation, the whole creation, this annihilation, it's called Kopakal. Kop actually refers to the Lord's anger, and Lord Shiva, he knows that he will have to play the part of the Lord's anger, and so he annihilates the world. But at the end, Lord Shiva, he is also annihilated by Lord Vishnu. And then only Lord Vishnu remains. We also have the 4 yugas, the ages of Satyug, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And they rotate like seasons, actually. And so time, it's present in the cycle of these ages. In Dwapar Yuga, we know Krishna appeared in the black color, and in the Kali Yuga, where we are now, Lord Chaitanya appeared in the yellow color. And the unmanifested forces of time, actually, they are so powerful, they can decay all matter in due course. So now, in Kali Yuga, the duration of our body has been reduced a lot. Just like our memory, we only use about 1% of our brain capacity, like the average person does. Not only that, but in the Kali Yuga, the land, it doesn't produce as much food grains as it used to in the other ages. Similarly, the cow, it doesn't give as much milk as it used to. And so time, it's actually described, it's like a big wheel. We've heard, Kala Chakra. And so it has 360 joints and has like 3 rims in the shape of seasons, and it has numberless leaves in the shape of moments. And it actually rotates on eternal existence, Brahman. And so the Kala Chakra, it's actually the Lord's personal weapon. And it expands from the beginning of atoms all the way up to, the time of Lord Brahma's death. And it controls all activities. So it's always revolving. And always spending the lives of the living entities, of us. And so, we were originally avikara, unchangeable. But now, in this material world, we're actually suffering a lot because of the changes that time brings about. And so we change, from infancy to childhood to youth, to maturity, and then we approach the end of life. And then we transfer into another body. And so the entire Kala Chakra, it's established on the wheel of the sun god, on his chariot actually, which is known as Samvatsara, and it's pulled by 7 horses. And so the sun, it's actually under the control of time, and it moves within that Kala Chakra, within that orbit of time. And so the Kala Chakra, not only does it control the sun, but all the bodies in us, like I said. So we know that time, Kal, it influences the material world, but how exactly does it interact with, the conditioned souls like us? So eternal time, it's described as imperceptible and insurmountable to us, like conditioned souls, when we're too attached to our family affairs and always, thinking about that. So imperceptible, it means something is gradual, so it isn't really that noticeable. So we don't really notice, in everyday life when we're working, we don't realize how life is passing away, how time is chasing after us. And so in this way, we're an illusion. We don't realize how life is diminishing every second. And so mirages and other illusory things, they're actually sometimes called Gandharvas. So Gandharvas are actually celestial singers and musicians in the upper planetary systems, but this imperceptible passing away of life, it's actually referred to as Gandharvas figuratively. And so in the Gandharva lok, King Chandravega, he has 360 very powerful Gandharva soldiers. And these powerful soldiers, they actually very swiftly carry away all the days of our life. We know how time can just fly by. And so as the sun rises and the sun sets, each day as it passes, we lose some of our life's duration. And it's actually said we can't actually save the duration of our life, but if we're engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, then our time cannot be taken away by the Son. Now, time we saw has also been described as insurmountable, which means too great to be overcome. So, time, it can seem overwhelming, if you don't know about the eternal nature of the spirit soul. And this is actually the plight for us, the conditioned souls. We can't really enjoy anything because Krishna, he is the supreme enjoyer. We are to be enjoyed. But, we're always suffering because we're struggling very hard, with the six senses, including the mind. And we think we're enjoying this material world, but actually even that enjoyment, that's just suffering. And so the Srimad Bhagavatam, it actually compares us, the conditioned soul, to a camel. How? Well, the camel, it's very fond of eating thorny twigs that cut its tongue. And so when he eats the thorny twigs, blood comes from his tongue and it actually mixes with those twigs. And so the twigs, they have a bit more flavor, And so he's thinking, the camel, oh wow, these twigs are very nice. And so this is called Maya, We think we're enjoying, but it's actually suffering. And so Maya, it means that which is not. Ma means not, and Ya means this. So Maya means not this. And so when we're conditioned, we actually think in terms of dualities, like hot and cold, and pain and pleasure. And so spiritual life actually means to become unconditioned. That is the perfection of life. And so as soon as we engage in Krishna consciousness, we actually transcend the limits of past and present and time, because then we're actually situated in the eternal activities of the soul. And this is because we understand the eternality of personality and the eternality of individuality. So the eternality of personality, it actually refers to the nature of the spirit soul and the Lord as well. The Sri Ishopanishad, it mentions that except for the Madhyama Adhikari and the Uttama Adhikari, no one can really correctly see the spiritual position of a living being. And so the living entities, us, we are qualitatively one with the Lord. So just as, the sparks of a fire, it's qualitatively one with the fire. So we are the same as the Supreme Lord in quality, but not quantity. And we should also understand the eternality of individuality. So each of us souls, we are individual parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, Krishna, and he is actually complete. And so Mahabhagavat actually, the topmost devotee, they have three qualities. So they see everything systematically in relation to the Supreme Lord. They see all living entities as parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. And they see the Supreme Lord within everyone, every living entity. And so it never hate, Mahabhagavat, they never hate anything or any being. Like take Maharaj Parikshit, for instance. He was kind even to the personality of Kali. And so in one lecture, Srila Prabhupada says that a Mahabhagavat is on the highest stage, the perfectional stage, and we shouldn't imitate them. So we shouldn't imitate them, but what we can do, at least we can come to the middle stage, if not the highest stage, like a Mahabhagavat, So what is that middle stage? It's to understand Krishna and his devotees. Now time, it moves very sharply, as if it's actually made of razors and thunderbolts. And so even a moment of our lifetime, we can't return it in exchange for $1 million or even $1 billion, And so we can understand how much loss we suffer if we waste even just a single moment of our life, doing nothing or just for nothing. So like, if you're a student, you think, oh, I've studied so hard the whole day, so, what's wrong with me just spending half an hour chatting to my friends? Or, if we finished work, then we think, oh, I've finished work, I've worked hard so the whole day. And so, what's wrong with me just spending a few time, like having some me time, on the way back home, on the train ride. So I'll just scroll through Facebook, for a bit just to see what's happening in my world, what my family and friends are up to. There's nothing I can do on the train anyway, So you think, oh, I'll just watch this 6-minute video. I'm not going to spend the whole 30 minutes on Facebook. But then as you're watching, another video comes up, and then another, and it's just like that cycle. And then without realizing, we might spend, the whole train ride just watching videos. Some people even might miss their station, because they were on Facebook or on social media. And so we should use our time wisely. On a morning walk, Srila Prabhupada, he was asked about the moon expedition, astronauts going to the moon. And Srila Prabhupada said, it's simply a waste of time and money, that's all. They've been trying to go to the moon for so many years, and they haven't gained anything except for dust, but they're still trying. They spend so much time, so much money, but what's their purpose? Their effort is hopeless, because they don't actually know the purpose of life, The scientists, they're spending so much money, and the politicians are financing them, but the result is just zero. And so Srila Prabhupada says, they're actually like a doctor who doesn't understand a particular disease, but the doctor would still say to the patient, okay, well, first try this pill, and if that doesn't work, then try this one, And the doctor, he'll never admit that he actually doesn't know the cure or the remedy for the disease. And so, similarly, the scientists, they're just bluffing, They're just cheating us. Because they can't actually solve the real problems of life, birth, death, old age, and disease. And so, all their programs are taking place on the utopian platform, which in Sanskrit is called Akash Pushpa. Akash Pushpa means a flower from the sky. And so all the scientists' efforts to know the truth by exploring outer space, it's like they're trying to pluck a flower from the sky. And so we should be really careful, to use our time wisely for spiritual realization or Krishna consciousness. So we might ask, okay, so how do I use my time in Krishna consciousness so that I don't waste it? So, first of all, we shouldn't engage in prajalpa, We shouldn't indulge in talking unnecessarily about mundane matters, like news of the material world. Srila Prabhupada says in the Updeshamrita, in the Nectar of Instruction, like when we talk unnecessarily, we sound just like croaking toads. So, we should talk about Krishna consciousness. And so, a devotee should always try to hear about spiritual matters and should always chant, using his time to chant the holy name of the Lord. Actually, any time or anywhere pure devotees, they meet and chant the glories of the Lord is actually present there without doubt. The Lord himself, he says, he always stays where his pure devotees chant his glories. And so, the devotees, they are ekanishta, or absolutely attached to the devotional service of the Lord. So they don't waste their valuable time by seeking material enjoyment. Rather, they engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And so, when we're conditioned, everyone is afraid of the activities of time. But a devotee who knows that the time factor is just another manifestation of the Lord has nothing to fear from the influence of time. And so eternal time, it's so powerful, it's capable of creating and destroying the whole world, simply by expanding his eyebrows, time personified can immediately just vanquish the entire universe. But despite this, time doesn't approach the devotee who has taken complete shelter in the Lord's lotus feet. And so, a devotee's devotional service is never lost by the influence of time. Even if a devotee can't completely execute devotional service, in his next life, he begins from the point where he left off. Krishna himself, he says, that intelligence engaged in my devotion can't be thwarted at any time. And so, even at the time of creation, as well as at the time of annihilation, your remembrance will continue by my mercy. And the Ishopanishad says that even if at the time of death, a devotee doesn't remember his service to the Lord doesn't forget him. Because Krishna thinks, since pure devotees, they give up their homes, their wives, their children, their relatives, their wealth, and even their life, just to serve me, without even desiring for, an improvement in their material life in this one or the next, how can I give them up? And so, it gives us a lot of hope and comfort. And we actually also find that the daughter of Kal, old age, Kala Kanya Jara, she can't overcome Vaishnavas either. And so if a person is Krishna conscious, then he can work like a young man, even if he's 80 or 75 or 80 years old. And so a devotee may grow old, but he is not subjected to the symptoms of defeat that, people normally face when they grow old because, they're constrained by their body. That's what they feel. And so old age, jara, doesn't actually make a devotee fearful of death, because a devotee knows after quitting their body, he's going to go back to Godhead. And so he has no fear of death. Instead of depressing a devotee, advanced age or old age actually makes him fearless and happy knowing that he'll go back to the Lord. And so it is said, when the sun rises and when it sets, it takes away the life of all the living entities, but it can't take away the life of those who are engaged in devotional service. So just to wrap up, I'll quickly summarize what we've talked about today. So we began looking at, atoms, how they are a measurement of times, and we saw, hexatoms, Thrasharenu, Triti, Vedalava, how they all kind of build on each other. And we also saw, the Lord. He's within every living entity and within every atom. And so he's truly everywhere. He's truly all around us. And then we focused on time, That was the main topic of our discussion today. And the purpose of the Shastras, in so elaborately describing time, is just to help us become detached from our material activities. And so our life, it seems to evolve around time, But time, it has no influence in the spiritual world, And the only way to free ourselves from the clutches of Kal in the material world is actually through the process of Bhakti Yoga. And we see, time comes from the Lord's eyelashes because it's a manifestation of the Lord, time is so powerful. And we saw that even though time was so powerful, it didn't influence, or it doesn't influence the Lord. And the Lord's Nitya Lila, his eternal pastimes, they take place at the same time and have no end. And time, it also plays a role in creation and destruction. So if there is a creation, if something manifests, then it's only a matter of time before it becomes unmanifest or it's destroyed. And then we looked at the influence of time in the material world. We saw how, the Kala Chakra, it's always revolving, and so we grow in this material world. We go, from infancy to childhood, we become youth and then old age. We saw how, for us, when we're too attached to our, family affairs or material world, eternal time, it can seem imperceptible or not really noticeable, and insurmountable, too great to be overcome. And so in this way, we are illusion, we are in Maya. And so time gone, it doesn't come back, Time is very valuable. And so we should use our time to engage in devotional service. And we saw that when we become devotees, we're not influenced by Jara, old age, the daughter of time. And so what to speak of old age, actually? When we become devotees, even though time is so powerful, eternal time can't conquer us. The eternal spirit souls, devotees of the Lord. And so if we finish here, thank you for your time. Hare Krishna. Would anybody like to share any realizations? Sure. So, Jara, old age. It's not that a devotee, when they're present in the material world, that their body doesn't age. It definitely does, physically. But it's more of the mood, the spirit that a devotee has. They're not defeated by old age, They don't feel constrained by old age because they can't do, what they could as a young person, when they were physically fit or in the prime of their youth. And so, although old age, does affect, the physical body, the mood of a devotee isn't really affected. And so that's what we mean when we say old age, Jara, it can't conquer the devotees of the Lord because they are so absorbed in the Lord, engaging in devotional service. Yes, Mataji. Yes, so 2.13 in Bhagavad Gita. So when, as we advance, go old age, then we transfer bodies at the time of death according to our desires as well. But the transference of our body, so that's Bhagavad Gita 2.13. So dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namoyati. So the Lord says, just as the embodied soul in this body, even in this present life, the soul in this body keeps changing, from boyhood to youth to old age. Similarly, at the time of death, the soul, it also passes into another body. And so the body just keeps changing, So that's described. Mm. Yes. Mm. Yes. Mm. Yes. So, Bhagavad Gita 2.7, it's basically telling us, when we are confused, we may try to use our intelligence, or we may think, I know what to do, what's best for me, but we don't really know what's truly best for us, so it can be difficult. So Arjuna, he was like, Karpanya dosho pata svabhava prachami tvam dharma samuracheta yashreyasya nishchitan bruhitan me shishyastayam shadimam tvam prapannam. So he was like, I have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. And so Arjuna, he was confused about his duty. He didn't know what to do. Standing there on the battlefield, he didn't want to fight with the Kauravas because he was seeing them as, his family, his relatives, rather than the enemy. And so he's asking Krishna, please tell me for certain what's best for me. And so previously, they were, Krishna and Arjuna, their relationship was out of friendship. And so with friends, your friend may say something to you, but you're not obliged. You don't have to do what they say. It's just advice that you could or could not take. But here, Arjuna, we see he actually surrenders to the Lord and submits himself as a disciple. And so whatever the Guru says, the disciple must do. And so that is significant here. We must also surrender to the Lord, and then we won't be confused because we would know what to do under his shelter. Thank you. Anything else? Yes, thank you for sharing, Mataji. Okay. So if nothing else, we can finish here. Thank you for your kind attention. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagwan ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. Hare Hare.